We both know your parents hate me because of my background, and I know you love me. I'm sorry to say this, but you have to choose.
The evening air carried the scent of rain-soaked dust and fried onions drifting from the neighbor's window. Miriam stood barefoot on the cracked porch boards of her mother's narrow house, her arms wrapped tightly around her rounded belly. The porch light flickered weakly, buzzing like it couldn't decide whether to stay on or give up entirely. Inside, her mother's voice cut through the thin screen door like a blade. "You see now? Didn't I tell you? That man left you high and dry, Miriam." Miriam lowered her head. The rough wood beneath her feet bit into her skin, but she didn't move. Her mother, Naomi, stepped out onto the porch, still in her work uniform, creased scrubs and weary eyes that spoke of too many double shifts. She crossed her arms and stared her daughter down. "All that talk about love, about faith, about that rich boy who said he'd marry you," Naomi continued. "Where is he now? You're the one standing here alone, belly full and promises empty." Miriam tried to answer, but her throat felt tight. "Mama, he didn't mean to." "Didn't mean to what?" Naomi interrupted sharply. "Didn't mean to make you a fool in front of this whole street? Didn't mean to vanish after filling your head with dreams? Please." She scoffed, turning away with a frustrated shake of her head. The sound of the neighbor's TV carried faintly through the thin walls, some game show laughter clashing with the heaviness of Miriam's silence. Miriam's heart beat so loud it filled her ears. She wanted to explain that Dante had loved her, that what they shared wasn't some foolish fantasy, but the words wouldn't come, because deep down, even she wasn't sure anymore. Naomi sighed, softening for a brief second, as she studied her daughter's trembling hands. "You were always a smart girl," she said, her voice gentler now, "but you let love blind you. I raised you better than that." Miriam swallowed hard. Her eyes burned, but she refused to cry in front of her mother. She looked past the porch rail, toward the narrow street lined with rusted mailboxes and dented cars. The sun had already dipped low, leaving the world cloaked in dull orange light. "I still believe in him," Miriam finally said, barely above a whisper. "He wouldn't just walk away, not like that." Naomi gave a dry chuckle that wasn't amusement at all. "You believe what you want, baby. But love don't pay rent, and faith doesn't fix foolish choices. You better start thinking about what comes next, because that man you're waiting on, he's not coming back." Her words landed heavy, final. Naomi turned toward the door, muttering something under her breath about hard-headed girls and heartbreak, when the faint sound of an engine rose from down the block. It started as a low hum, steady, distant. Miriam's attention shifted, her heart tripping in rhythm with the approaching sound. Naomi paused too, glancing down the dimly lit street. Headlights swept across the cracked asphalt, casting sharp lines of light against the worn houses. The vehicle's engine was deep, powerful, too refined for their side of town. Naomi frowned. Who on earth drives that kind of car down here? Miriam said nothing. Her pulse quickened. She stepped closer to the edge of the porch, gripping the rail. The glow grew brighter, the engine louder. Within seconds, the unmistakable grille of a Rolls Royce emerged from the darkness, its silver hood gleaming beneath the streetlight. The car slowed, its tires whispering against the road before coming to a stop right in front of their house. The neighborhood fell silent. No barking dogs, no buzzing TVs, just the hum of that luxury machine idling like it didn't belong there. Naomi blinked, her mouth slightly open. "What kind of—" She started, then looked at her daughter, suspicion and confusion flickering across her face. Miriam's hands trembled as she clutched her belly. The last time she'd seen that kind of car, she'd been smiling beside Dante, thinking the world finally made sense. Now, as the car door opened and a polished black shoe stepped out, her breath caught in her throat. The world seemed to hold its breath too. Naomi took an uncertain step toward the edge of the porch. Her arms dropped from her chest, no longer crossed, but hanging awkwardly at her sides. Her voice, moments ago so firm and biting, now faltered. Do you know who that is?" she asked. Miriam couldn't speak. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Her hands moved to her stomach, instinctively shielding the child within. The low growl of the engine hummed steadily in the background, contrasting the eerie quiet that now blanketed the block. The front door of the Rolls Royce cracked open with a soft click, Naomi squinted. "Must be someone lost," she muttered, though she didn't sound convinced. "No one with that kind of car has any reason to stop here." But Mariam didn't move. Her chest rose and fell, as if she'd just run a mile. Her skin tingled with apprehension, confusion, and the tiniest flicker of hope, the kind of hope that sneaks in even when you're afraid to feel it. She gave her heart to a man who had everything: power, status, a future already mapped out. And then he left her with nothing but silence and shame. The world laughed. Even her own mother mocked her. But right now, that world has paused, because something or someone is back. Across the street, curtains twitched. Porch lights blinked on one by one as curious neighbors peeked out their windows. An expensive car like that didn't just pull up without making noise, even if the engine barely whispered. A child on a bicycle stopped and stared. The neighborhood hadn't seen a vehicle like this in years, if ever. Naomi's voice returned, sharp now. "If this is some stunt from that boy Mariam, I swear—" Mariam shook her head, barely above a whisper. "I didn't know. I didn't—" He didn't say anything. Have you ever been judged for believing in love? For trusting someone when everyone around you told you not to? She was told she was foolish, naive, blind, that a man like Dante would never choose someone like her, and maybe they were right. Or maybe they were just too afraid to believe in something real. The car door opened fully now. Naomi clutched her robe tighter, her spine stiffening. Mariam stood frozen, trying to prepare herself for whatever, or whoever, was about to emerge. For a long second, nothing happened. Just the open door, waiting. The stillness was unbearable. Mariam's fingers pressed against her belly. The baby shifted inside her, a soft, timed movement that reminded her of why she'd held on for so long, why she hadn't given up. She was pregnant, broke, and standing on the edge of faith. Alone, but not abandoned. Not completely, because faith, even the smallest grain of it, had carried her through the worst nights. Behind her, Naomi whispered, "Who would drive a car like that around here?" Mariam didn't answer. Her eyes were locked on the open door. The light above the porch flickered again. A cool breeze pushed through the block, ruffling the hem of Mariam's dress. A voice, clear, familiar, and devastatingly real, cut through the night. "Mariam." Naomi sucked in her breath. Mariam blinked hard. The voice came from inside the car. A figure shifted. What if love didn't give up? What if it returned, against all odds, in a way no one saw coming? What if your worst heartbreak became the beginning of your greatest breakthrough? The shadow stepped forward. Naomi's mouth dropped open. She gripped the porch railing so tight her knuckles turned white. Mariam gasped, softly. Her knees wobbled, but she stood her ground. This story didn't start with a luxury car. It started with a lecture, a thunderstorm, and a night that changed everything. To understand how Mariam got here, we have to go back to when she first met him. If you've ever believed in a love that everyone else said was impossible, or if you've ever been counted out, mocked, or left behind, this story is for you. Stay with us to see how Mariam's journey unfolds, and how faith, love, and unexpected grace can rewrite even the most painful beginnings. Before we begin, hit that like button so YouTube knows this story matters. Share it with someone who needs hope today. And drop a comment if you've ever had to fight for love. Don't forget to subscribe. We've got something powerful to share with you. 6 months earlier, South Atlanta, Georgia. The city was alive in its usual rhythm. Buses wheezing at intersections, corner stores buzzing with school kids grabbing snacks, and church bells chiming from down the block. Mariam hurried across the university courtyard, balancing a beat-up leather bag on one shoulder and a coffee in her hand that had already lost most of its heat. Her curly hair bounced in a high puff, and her denim jacket was patched at the elbows, a small rebellion against her school's sea of business blazers. She was late. Again. She cut through the Fountain Plaza, sidestepping skateboarders and a pop-up voter registration booth. As she passed the chapel steps, she slowed just long enough to nod respectfully at the old pastor handing out mini pamphlets. "God bless you, baby," he said, smiling. "Thank you, Pastor Green," she called over her shoulder, breath catching as she broke into a jog. This was Mariam, 22, black, first-generation college student. business major with a dream of starting a nonprofit for inner-city teens. Her part-time job at the campus financial aid office barely covered rent. Sundays were reserved for New Light Baptist, her second home, and in the spare few minutes she had left each day, she prayed, not for luxury, not even for love. She prayed for strength, for endurance, for favor, because she knew what it was like to struggle, to walk past payday loan shops and boarded-up storefronts and still believe there was something greater for her out there. Her mother's sacrifices had taught her that, "Keep your head up, Mariam," Naomi always said. "Work twice as hard, pray 3 times harder, and never let a man distract you from your purpose." So she did, not really, until that day. Mariam reached the lecture hall just as the dean was giving the introduction. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our guest speaker, Mr. Dante Whitman." She slipped into a seat in the back row, trying not to draw attention as she caught her breath. The room hushed, and that's when she saw him for the first time. He didn't look like he belonged. Not because he was white. The school had plenty of diversity on brochures, if not always in practice. No, it was something else. Dante Whitman wore a tailored navy suit that looked custom-made. His shoes gleamed, his posture was too polished. His watch was the kind of thing you only saw in jewelry store ads. Yet when he spoke, his voice was calm, focused, not rehearsed like most rich men who come to give motivational talks. "I'm not here to tell you how to get rich," Dante said, pacing slowly. "I'm here to ask what you'll do once you are." That line made a few students chuckle, but Mariam squinted, curious. "See, my family has money," he continued. "Old money. But I've realized that wealth isn't the legacy I want to leave behind. I want to use business to build impact, real, measurable change, especially in places the corporate world tends to ignore." Mariam's eyebrows lifted. She'd heard a lot of slick talkers over the years, especially politicians on campaign stops. But something about Dante's delivery, it wasn't flashy. He seemed like a man trying, really trying, to say something honest. Still, she wasn't sold yet. When the Q&A began, most students lobbed softball questions. How do I build generational wealth? What apps do you use to track investments? What's your morning routine? Mariam raised her hand. "You talked about creating change in underserved communities," she said, voice steady. "But isn't that a little hypocritical, coming from someone whose family profits off gentrification and high-end real estate?" The entire room turned. Dante paused. "And then?" He smiled. "That's a fair point," he said, nodding. "My family has done business that I don't always agree with. That's part of why I'm here. I'm trying to do it differently." Mariam leaned back in her seat, intrigued. For once, a rich man didn't get defensive. He answered, with humility. She didn't know it then, but that moment, a single question in a sea of flattery, was the spark. The lecture ended with polite applause, and the usual scramble of students rushing for selfies, handshakes, and name-dropping. Dante smiled and nodded like a seasoned pro, but his eyes kept flicking toward the back row. Toward her. Mariam didn't linger. She gathered her bag, stuffed her notebook away, and began heading toward the exit. She wasn't starstruck. She wasn't trying to get noticed. She'd asked her question, gotten her answer, and that was enough. She had a shift at the library front desk in less than an hour, and no time to be charmed. Still, she paused at the refreshments table near the exit, pouring herself a plastic cup of fruit punch, the kind that tasted more like syrup than juice. As she reached for a napkin, another hand reached for the same cup. Their fingers brushed. "Oops." "My bad," came the voice. She looked up. It was him, Dante Whitman. In a room full of tailored smiles and empty flattery, he had walked straight to the one woman who challenged him. "You asked the gentrification question, right?" he said. Mariam nodded. "Was it too much?" "No. It was honest," he replied, "which is rare." He looked genuinely curious. "Mind if I ask your name?" She hesitated, then extended her hand. "Mariam." "Dante," he said, even though she obviously knew. He chuckled. "Sorry, old habit." They stood there a moment longer, sipping their drinks like two awkward freshmen instead of a billionaire's heir and a girl trying to keep her lights on. "Your answer surprised me," she admitted. Dante tilted his head. "Good, or bad surprise? Still deciding, Mariam smirked, and Dante laughed. Their banter was natural. There was no force, no trying too hard. Mariam made a passing joke about his shoes looking too clean to have walked any real Atlanta pavement. Dante countered with a grin, pointing out that she'd pronounced entrepreneur correctly, which was more than he could say for half the business school. Minutes passed. Then 20, they talked about school, their families, their dreams. Mariam told him about growing up in South Atlanta, the local corner store, where she used to do her homework after school, while her mom worked late shifts at the hospital. Dante listened, asking real questions, not out of pity, not with that overcompensating guilt she sometimes saw from rich white people trying too hard to relate. No, he listened because he was interested. "I want to start a nonprofit," she said, her voice steady, "for kids from my neighborhood. Help them get to college, navigate applications, financial aid, interviews. The whole mess. I didn't have anyone to guide me." She paused. "Except my mom." "That's powerful," Dante said. "And smart. You're not just chasing money, you're building something." Mariam glanced sideways. "Aren't you supposed to be the one building things? You'd be surprised how many people in my world build businesses that don't help anyone." He said it lightly, but there was something underneath, something tired. "What about you?" she asked. "What would you do if you weren't, Dante Whitman?" Dante looked surprised by the question. He stared at his cup for a moment. "I'd probably be a teacher," he said quietly. "High school. History, maybe." Mariam blinked. "Seriously?" He nodded. "I like stories. Real ones. Stories of struggle, of resilience. Stuff they don't teach in prep schools." A beat passed. "You're not what I expected," she said. "You're exactly what I didn't expect," he replied, watching her closely. Outside, thunder rumbled. Mariam checked her phone. The shuttle she usually caught had already left, and the dark clouds rolling in didn't look promising. "You have a ride?" Dante asked. She shook her head. "Nah, I live off campus. I'll call an Uber." "Good luck getting one in this weather," he said, nodding toward the window. Rain had started. Light at first, then harder. A bolt of lightning flashed. The lights flickered once, then twice. "You okay staying a bit?" he asked. "I was going to wait the storm out anyway." Mariam hesitated. She had no umbrella, no coat, and no desire to get soaked. She looked around. Most students were already gone. The building was growing quieter by the second. "I guess I can wait," she said, trying not to sound nervous. "Come on," he said, motioning down the hall. "There's a lounge downstairs. Usually empty this late. You've been here before?" "3 times," he said. "Twice for speaking, once for fundraising. I know the good hiding spots." She followed him. Down the hall, down the stairs. The power flickered again, casting long shadows on the hallway walls. She didn't know it then, but this was the moment everything began to shift. Not with a kiss, not with promises, but with the decision to trust. By the time they reached the lower level of the business building, thunder was cracking like the sky itself had something to say. The hallway lights blinked again. Not quite an outage, but definitely not stable either. Dante reached a door with a faded label. "Student Lounge, East Wing." He tried the handle. It clicked open. "Lucky," he said, pushing the door wide. Inside was a forgotten little room, with mismatched furniture. 2 worn sofas, a few folding chairs, and a scratched-up coffee table. Posters for past events curled at the corners on the walls. There was even a mini kitchenette, with a broken microwave and an unplugged mini-fridge. But most important, it was dry, quiet, safe. Mariam stepped in slowly, shaking the rain from her jacket's sleeve. "Wow," she said. "This is not terrible." Dante grinned. "That's a glowing review." He pulled out his phone. "Power's going out soon. No cell service either. This storm's serious." Mariam set her bag on the couch and exhaled. "Looks like we're stuck." A strong gust of wind rattled the windows. The power flickered again, and this time, it died. Darkness. Total. For a moment, neither of them moved. Dante clicked on his phone's flashlight, casting a narrow beam of light through the gloom. He opened a cabinet and, to both their surprise, found a small emergency box. candles, a flashlight, and even a faded checkers board. "Whoever stocked this deserves a raise," he muttered. He lit 2 candles and set them on the table. The flickering glow softened the room. "Okay," he said, motioning to the couch. "We wait it out." Miriam hesitated. It wasn't about trust, not exactly, but it was still new. He was still new. They'd only just met hours ago. Yet, here she was, alone with him, in a candlelit room while a storm raged outside. But he wasn't trying anything. No suggestion in his eyes, no false charm. He just sat down and stretched his long legs in front of him like someone who hadn't had a break in weeks. "So," he said, turning toward her, "what made you ask that question? About my family and gentrification?" Miriam sat too, tucking one leg beneath her. "Because it's real. The places your family builds, they replace people like me, like my mom. We lose homes, history, not just buildings." Dante nodded slowly. "I know. That's why I want to do it differently. My dad doesn't always listen, but I'm trying to shift the way we operate. I want to fund affordable housing. I pitched it last year." They smiled and changed the subject. Miriam raised a brow. "So, you're the rebel billionaire?" He laughed. "If only." More like the polite disappointment. Miriam gave him a side glance. "So why don't you just walk away, start your own company?" He looked at her, his eyes darker now. "Because I'm engaged." That landed with a weight neither of them expected. Miriam blinked. "Oh, wow. It's complicated," he added quickly. "It's not about love. It's a business arrangement, families, connections, all that." "But you agreed to it." Dante nodded, then looked away. "I did. I wasn't strong enough to say no." Silence. Miriam adjusted the blanket she'd pulled around her shoulders. Her voice dropped. "You ever been so scared of disappointing someone that you forgot about yourself?" Dante looked at her sharply. "Every day." And just like that, the space between them changed. Not romantic, not yet, but honest, raw. 2 people who, despite wildly different lives, carried the same weight of expectation. Outside, the storm howled. Inside, 2 strangers sat in a dark room, finding light in each other. The storm showed no sign of letting up. Lightning lit the lounge windows every few seconds. Each flash painted Dante's face in quick, ghostly strokes. The sharp lines of his jaw, the furrow in his brow when he was deep in thought. Miriam tucked herself deeper into the blanket, glancing at him from the corner of her eye. "So," she asked, softly breaking the silence, "how does someone raised in a world of marble floors and private jets end up caring about the forgotten?" Dante didn't answer immediately. "Because I've been forgotten too," he finally said. "Not in the same way, but in my family, I'm not a person. I'm a placeholder, a groomed heir. My voice doesn't matter unless it echoes theirs." Miriam tilted her head, surprised by his openness. "And your fiancée?" "Penelope," he said with a half shrug. "She's efficient, elegant, trained for high society. Our parents agreed to it when we were still in college." "Sounds cold." "It is." Another flash of lightning revealed the crease in his forehead, the way his hand tightened briefly into a fist before he relaxed again. "Do you love her?" Miriam asked. He didn't flinch. "No." She nodded slowly, unsure how to feel. She knew she shouldn't care. They barely knew each other. And yet, Dante turned to her, his expression softening. "You know something?" he said. "Tonight, talking to you. This is the first time in a long while I've felt like I could just breathe." Miriam smiled gently. "That's kinda sad." "Maybe. But it's also honest." He leaned back against the sofa and closed his eyes briefly. "You ever feel like your life is moving, but you're not the one steering?" Miriam gave a short laugh. "Every day. Especially when my rent's due and I'm eating ramen with hot sauce trying to pretend it's gumbo." Dante laughed. Really laugh, not the polite chuckles he gave during the Q&A earlier. "That's what I like about you," he said. "You don't sugarcoat anything." "No time for that," she said. "Truth's already sweet when it's real." Another clap of thunder made the room tremble. She jumped. "You okay?" Dante asked. "Yeah," she said, trying to cover her reaction with a smile. Storms and I have a complicated relationship. Come here, he said, lifting the other side of the blanket. She hesitated. I won't bite, he added. Unless you ask. She laughed but slid closer. The warmth of his body surprised her. Strong, calm, steady. They sat like that, shoulder to shoulder, the flicker of candles throwing soft light on the walls. Time slowed. Miriam looked up at him. What if your family never accepts someone like me? She asked suddenly. What if I'm just a story you tell yourself to feel different? Dante's eyes locked on hers. You're not a story. You're a wake-up call. She looked away, but he caught her chin gently, guiding her gaze back to his. Miriam, tonight may have started with lightning, but it's ending with something I never expected. Peace. A beat passed. And maybe something else, he said, eyes flicking to her lips. Maybe, she whispered. He leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. Their lips met, soft, searching. No music, no fanfare. Just two people, in the middle of a storm, finding each other in the quiet. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't perfect. It was real. And when they finally pulled apart, both a little breathless, Miriam whispered something she'd never admitted to anyone. That was my first kiss. Dante froze. Wait. Ever? She nodded. I've been careful. Dante looked at her with something deeper than admiration. I'll be careful with you, he said softly. She smiled, leaning into him. The storm outside still roared, but inside that tiny lounge, the world had shifted. Something new had taken root, something both fragile and unshakable. Morning sunlight crept through the slatted blinds. For a moment, Miriam didn't move. Her cheek rested against Dante's chest, the steady rhythm of his breathing grounding her. She could hear the soft hum of electricity again. The power had returned. The storm had passed. She opened her eyes slowly, blinking against the brightness. Last night hadn't been a dream. The blanket still lay tangled around them. The melted candle had formed a pool of wax on the coffee table. Her clothes were slightly rumpled. Her heart still racing. She sat up gently. Dante stirred beside her. Hey, he said, his voice low and warm. You okay? She nodded. Yeah, just letting it all sink in. He smiled and ran a hand through his hair. I wasn't sure if you'd still be here. Me neither, she whispered. Silence settled between them. Not awkward, not uncertain, just quiet. The room looked different in daylight, less enchanted, more mundane, the kind of place that held leftover pizza boxes and forgotten textbooks. But for Miriam, it had become something else. You hungry? Dante asked, stretching. Only if you're buying, she teased. Always, he said. Just maybe nothing that requires a reservation. My card's still recovering from that Uber Black I took last week. She raised an eyebrow. Oh? Billionaire problems? Former billionaire, he joked. They cleaned up the room as best they could, blowing out candles, folding the blankets, setting chairs back in place. By the time they stepped out into the crisp morning, the sun was out in full, as if the storm had never happened. The sidewalks sparkled with leftover rain. The air smelled like wet pavement and tree bark. Miriam walked beside him, her steps a little slower, her thoughts a little louder. What now? What happens when the storm is gone, and all you have left is the memory of one night that felt like a whole world? Dante unlocked his car, a sleek black Mercedes parked under a tree. It looked out of place on campus, even more so than he did. He opened the passenger door for her, and she slid in, adjusting the seatbelt around her belly. She hadn't even realized how sore her body felt until she sat down. This feels like the end of a movie, she said, watching the campus buildings disappear through the window. Maybe it's just the beginning, he said. The drive to her neighborhood was quiet, but not heavy. They passed corner stores, beauty salons with open signs flipped backward, and a mural of Rosa Parks and John Lewis painted across a brick wall. Miriam stole a glance at Dante. He didn't seem uncomfortable. You've never been over here before, have you? She asked. No, he admitted. But I like it. Most people just lock their doors and pretend they don't see us. I see you. That landed deep. She looked back out the window, hiding the sudden rush of emotion behind a slight smile. When they reached her apartment, Dante parked carefully, avoiding the pothole near the curb like he'd been there a dozen times. He walked her to the door. "So, should I call you? Text? Send a carrier pigeon?" he asked, half joking. "Smoke signals," she replied with a straight face. Then, softening, "Text is good." He grinned. "Cool." They stood in front of her door for a beat too long. "Last night was—" he began. "Yeah," she said. "It really was." He stepped forward and kissed her forehead. Gentle, without expectation. "I'll be in touch," he promised. "I'll be waiting," she whispered. She closed the door behind her, leaned her back against it, and exhaled. The apartment was quiet. No Naomi, no judgment, just Miriam, the echo of his touch, and a heart full of questions she wasn't sure how to ask. She walked to the window and peeked through the curtain. He was still outside, just sitting in his car. Eventually, he drove off, and Miriam whispered to herself, "Please don't let last night be the last time." Miriam adjusted the strap of her leather book bag, the weight of textbooks pulling hard on her shoulder. The sidewalk beneath her Converse was cracked and uneven. The wind nipped at the hem of her denim jacket, and the rush-hour traffic screamed from both ends of the block. It was just another Monday in South Atlanta. She crossed in front of the old corner store, the same one she and her cousins used to run into after Sunday service for push-pops and now and laters. The mural of Martin Luther King Jr. on the side had faded some, but the quote beneath it still shined. "Faith is taking the first step even when you don't see the whole staircase." That quote stayed with her. It was the kind of faith her mother, Naomi, lived by, and the kind Miriam had tried to live by too. At 22, Miriam was a senior at Atlanta Metro University, majoring in business leadership and community development. She wasn't the loudest student or the most popular, but people noticed her because she moved with purpose. Even when things were hard, she carried herself like someone who expected more from the world and more from herself. Her life was a careful balance: early morning classes, afternoon shifts at the financial aid office, night classes, weekend tutoring, and volunteering at her church's youth outreach. She still made time to braid her little cousin's hair on Saturdays and FaceTime her grandma every Wednesday. She wasn't chasing clout. She was chasing change. "You've got vision, baby," her pastor once told her. "Don't let this world blur it." And she wouldn't. Every day, Miriam walked past shuttered businesses and liquor stores to get to campus. She knew what it felt like to live paycheck to paycheck, to pray before swiping a card at the grocery store. She also knew that the system didn't make space for girls like her, so she decided to make space herself. With a passion for equity and education, she dreamed of starting a nonprofit one day, a program that would help high school students from low-income neighborhoods prepare for college. She'd already mapped out the business plan. All she needed was capital. And maybe a few miracles. Miriam's faith wasn't flashy. She didn't quote scripture in every sentence or post devotionals on social media. But she prayed. Every morning, every night. Quiet, intimate, deliberate. It kept her anchored, grounded, whole. She didn't go looking for love. Not because she didn't want it, but because she didn't have time for distractions. Life had taught her that some kinds of love come wrapped in sweet talk and false promises. She'd seen it with her mother, with her friends, and in her own past. So Miriam kept her guard up, her heart locked up tighter than Fort Knox. But all of that was about to change. Starting with one unexpected invitation. Dante Whitman looked out the tinted window of the Escalade as it pulled up to the university gates. His suit jacket rested neatly beside him, his collar loosened slightly. On his lap was a leather folio filled with neatly typed talking points. He hadn't read them, not because he didn't care, but because he already knew what they said. Legacy, innovation, opportunity, investment, impact. Same words, different day. He exhaled slowly and stepped out into the bright morning sun. A student volunteer greeted him with a nervous smile, holding a university-branded umbrella. "Welcome, Mr. Whitman. We're honored to have you." "Thanks. Just Dante's fine," he said, offering a polite smile as he tucked his hands into his slacks. At 27, Dante was the golden boy of the Whitman Group, a multi-generational real estate empire with skyscrapers, shopping districts, and luxury housing projects spanning 6 states. His father, David Whitman, was a man obsessed with control. His mother, Marianne, with appearances. Dante? He was still figuring it out. He'd graduated from Stanford with top honors, interned in Dubai, shadowed senior executives, and even sat on nonprofit boards. On paper, he was a success story. In his soul, he felt like a ghost inside a gilded mansion. From the outside, his life looked perfect. Designer clothes, private jets, high-profile events, and an engagement to Penelope Hanover, the daughter of a New York senator and an art collector. The pairing made sense. She was brilliant, composed, and raised with the same kind of expectations he was. But love? Love was nowhere in that arrangement. He didn't hate Penelope, but they didn't make each other laugh. They didn't argue passionately or dream wildly. They didn't challenge each other's beliefs. They simply aligned. And Dante had begun to hate alignment. That's why, when the Whitman Foundation encouraged him to speak at smaller universities about entrepreneurial development, he said yes. Not because he needed the PR, but because maybe, just maybe, he'd hear something real. That morning, as he walked through the campus courtyard, he felt the difference instantly. No marble floors, no valet service. Just students in hoodies and backpacks huddled under trees, professors scribbling formulas on whiteboards near open windows, and posters taped to lampposts for open mics and gospel nights. It smelled like ambition. It felt like truth. Dante made his way toward the lecture hall, ignoring the texts buzzing in his pocket from Penelope and his assistant. Focus, he told himself. This was his chance to do something real, even if just for an hour. The auditorium was already half full when Mariam arrived. She spotted her classmate waving at her from the second row, but Mariam chose the seat in the very back instead. She wasn't there to fangirl. She just wanted to hear what this rich boy had to say, and see if there was anything worth learning beneath the designer's smile. Dante took the stage with quiet command. No hype man, no dramatic music. Just him, a stool, and a simple mic. He started by asking questions no one expected. What if success isn't about income, but outcome? What if the best business model is the one that solves the most problems, not makes the most headlines? The room shifted. People leaned in. He talked about affordable housing, urban renewal, the need for transparency and leadership, and his desire to build companies that actually benefited the communities they touched. Mariam narrowed her eyes. Most of the crowd seemed sold, but she wanted to push further. When the Q&A opened, she raised her hand. If you care so much about urban communities, she asked plainly, why does your family's company keep buying up land and pricing the residents out? The room froze. A few heads turned. Someone snickered. But Dante didn't blink. That's a fair question, he said, and one I've asked my family more than once. Which is part of why I'm here, because talking about change in a boardroom is easy. Doing it here, in front of people with real stakes, that's where accountability starts. Mariam nodded once, impressed despite herself. Later, while grabbing a plastic cup of punch from the side table, she heard a voice beside her. Still think I'm full of it? She turned. Dante stood beside her, holding a matching cup and the faintest smirk. Mariam took a slow sip of her punch and studied him. Still deciding, she said coolly. That's fair, he replied, leaning against the table. But just so you know, I appreciated the question. Most people just nod and smile. Most people don't come from neighborhoods like mine. That's why I need people like you to keep me honest. Mariam raised an eyebrow. So you're not scared of being challenged? I welcome it. It's rare. There was a flicker then. Not quite flirtation, not quite curiosity, just something charged, unspoken, like the air before a storm. They talked about college, about the nonprofits she followed, about his travels and her struggles to even afford textbooks. He didn't talk down to her. She didn't try to impress him. It was just easy and electric. Before long, students started packing up. The room emptied. I've got a shift in 30 minutes, she said, glancing at her phone. Where? He asked. Library help desk. Gotta keep the lights on. Mind if I walk you there? You trying to get bonus points? She teased. Maybe, he said with a smile. She let him. That walk would lead to a detour neither of them expected. The walk across campus was short, but it revealed everything. Dante talked about being raised with pressure, expectations, deals made over dinners he never agreed to. Miriam talked about missing meals so her mom could pay the light bill, watching classmates disappear into bad situations, praying she wouldn't be next. They were from two different planets, but somehow they spoke the same language. "You know what I noticed?" he said as they reached the library steps. "What?" "You don't flinch when you talk about hard things. You just own them. Survival doesn't leave room for shame." He looked at her like he wanted to memorize that sentence. "You ever think about doing something bigger?" he asked. "Every day," she replied. They stood in front of the library, two paths diverging. "Well," she said, backing up a step. "Thanks for the walk, Mr. Whitman. Thanks for the truth, Miss Miriam." She smiled. "I hope I see you again," he added. "You might," she said, "if you keep showing up in places that matter." He watched her go, unsure whether to follow or wait. For the first time in a long time, Dante Whitman wanted something that couldn't be bought. Her. The sky had been gray all day, the kind of gray that made you second guess whether it was morning or evening. It wasn't until the lecture let out that Miriam felt the first cold slap of rain. By the time she reached the top of the library steps, her hoodie was damp and her curls had frizzed from the moisture. She checked the radar on her phone, red streaks across the screen, flashing alerts lighting up in quick succession. Tornado watch, flood warning, power outage possible. "Of course," she muttered. Dante had already texted her. "You okay?" "Looks like the city's trying to end itself." "Just wet," she replied, and slightly annoyed. "Want a ride?" "Nah. I'm on foot and halfway soaked already. I'll make it." What she didn't tell him was that she was trying to save her last rideshare credit for work tomorrow. She couldn't afford surge pricing. Not today. As she turned the corner toward the quad, the rain hit sideways. Umbrellas flipped in students' hands. Trash cans toppled. A loose recycling bin tumbled across the sidewalk like a tumbleweed. People ran for cover under awnings and doorways. The sky wasn't just angry. It was wild. Dante had been mid-call with a board member when he noticed the sirens blaring from the emergency towers on campus. His assistant's voice buzzed in his ear through the wireless headset, but his focus shifted to the downpour pelting the SUV windshield. "I'll call you back," he said, ending the call abruptly. He pulled into a visitor lot near the administration building and tossed the keys to the valet, ignoring protocol. His eyes scanned the sidewalks, looking for her, not just out of curiosity now, but worry. She better not be walking in this. The air was thick, electric. Branches whipped against traffic signs. Lights flickered inside nearby buildings. He spotted her, halfway across the quad, hood pulled over her head, moving fast but not fast enough. She was soaked through, still stubborn, still pushing through like the whole world wasn't collapsing around her. He jogged toward her, his designer loafers no match for the rising water collecting at the curb. "Miriam," he shouted. She turned, squinting through the sheets of rain. "You have got to be kidding me," she said as he reached her, breathless and dripping. "Come with me," he said, not even pausing. "To where?" "Anywhere that doesn't have lightning trying to kill us." They dashed across the lot, slipping once on the pavement, but catching each other's arms. As they ducked into a side door near the science building, the storm let out a thunderclap so loud it shook the concrete. They looked at each other, breathing hard, soaked from head to toe, eyes wide from adrenaline. "Okay," Miriam said, wiping rain from her forehead. "I'm listening now." The emergency lights glowed dimly in the hallway. Water dripped from the ends of their clothes, forming a trail behind them as they walked deeper into the building. Most of the campus had shut down for the day. Classes were canceled. Power was sporadic. This wing of the science department was empty, quiet except for the low howl of wind through cracked window seals. There, Dante pointed. A red sign hung above a thick gray door. Emergency shelter. Room B14. They pushed inside. The room was larger than expected, maybe a converted lab or break space. Inside were a couple of faded sofas, a few vending machines, old cabinets, and emergency supply kits stacked in plastic bins. A backup generator hummed in the corner, giving the room a soft mechanical warmth. It wasn't glamorous, but it was dry. I guess we're stuck here until it clears, Dante said, removing his soaked blazer and slinging it over a chair. Better than outside, Miriam said, pulling off her wet hoodie and wringing it out in the sink. They found blankets in one of the supply kits, scratchy but warm, and laid them out on the floor by the couches. Miriam used a paper towel to blot the water from her curls, while Dante removed his shoes and peeled off his drenched socks. You ever think the universe does this on purpose? He asked. Does what? Throws people together when they'd normally never cross paths. So you think we're fate? I didn't say that. You didn't have to, she said, smirking. Thunder cracked again, followed by the lights flickering once more. Great. Just when it was starting to feel cozy, Dante mumbled. Don't worry, Miriam said, walking over to a cabinet. My mom used to say, a storm's just God's way of making us sit still. She found a candle in one of the boxes and lit it with a match from the survival tin. Wow, Dante said, watching the small flame flicker to life. Don't be impressed yet. Let's see if we survive the next hour. They sat side by side on the floor, legs stretched out, sharing the blanket between them. The candle gave the room a soft golden glow. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, it was oddly peaceful. So, Dante said, what's the craziest thing you've ever done? You mean besides agreeing to talk to a billionaire in a blackout? I mean in life, honestly, she said, thinking, believing I could actually make it out of my neighborhood. That wasn't the answer he expected, but it was the one that made him lean in. Tell me more. Miriam shifted, pulling the blanket tighter around her legs. I come from a place where people don't leave, or if they do, they come back, broke, or broken. You go to school, get a job at the daycare or the DMV, and maybe marry your high school sweetheart if he doesn't end up inside. Dante listened. I knew I wanted different. Not better, just different. But every time I talked about college or business plans, people looked at me like I was asking for a unicorn. Even teachers, even family sometimes. That's wild, he said. Because I can't remember a time when someone didn't expect me to be successful. Exactly, she replied. Different worlds. She looked at him. What about you? What's your story when you're not on stage? Dante hesitated. I was raised in a house with 20 rooms and 4 people who never talked to each other unless it was over wine and business reports. Miriam blinked. Dang. Yeah. My dad measures love in performance. My mom measures it in photo ops. I learned early how to smile on cue. You didn't rebel. I tried. Once. I got sent to boarding school in Switzerland as a reset. She whistled low. I wanted to go into urban design, build community gardens, redesign low-income housing, stuff with purpose. My father said it was a waste of potential. Told me my job was to increase profits, not plant vegetables. Wow. That's bleak. He nodded. That's why I said yes to these campus tours. I needed to remember why I started caring in the first place. They sat in silence, the storm still loud beyond the walls, but quieter somehow with those truths between them. You ever feel lonely? Miriam asked. Dante looked at her. Only when I'm not with you. The emergency lounge had grown quieter. The storm outside still howled, but it had become background noise now, like a distant reminder of a world paused. Inside, it was warm, hushed, and almost surreal. The tiny candle on the table cast a soft golden aura, their shadows gently overlapping on the wall. Miriam leaned her head back against the couch and exhaled slowly. I don't open up like this, she admitted, eyes half closed. Neither do I, Dante said softly. But it feels right. She looked at him. Why me? She asked, voice cautious but honest. Because you're the first person who's ever looked at me like I wasn't just a name, he replied. You ask questions like you expect real answers. Isn't that how people should be? Yeah, he said, but they're not. Especially not in my world. He reached down, carefully adjusting the blanket over her legs. It wasn't flirtation, it was something else, care. The kind of quiet care people often forget matters. You don't treat me like a savior, he added. Because you're not, she said without hesitation. Dante smiled. Exactly. They sat in silence again, but it wasn't awkward. It was peaceful. The kind of silence you only share when two souls feel heard. He turned slightly, facing her. You said earlier that people thought your dreams were impossible. Still do. Well, they're wrong. Her brow arched. Why are you so sure? Because I've been around boardrooms full of so-called visionaries. But none of them have your fire. They don't talk about changing communities. They talk about flipping them for profit. She blinked slowly, taking in his words. Dante, you're not like I expected. You either. She gave a small laugh. What'd you expect? Angry black girl with attitude? No, just someone with walls so high I wouldn't even see your eyes. You saw them though, she whispered. Yeah, I did. A pause, a look. The moment held weight. Not forced or scripted, just honest. He leaned forward slightly. She didn't move away. You're kind, she said, but not fake about it. You listen, but you still challenge. You're fierce, but you don't lead with it. You're humble, but it's not weakness. They were talking about each other like they were discovering sacred truths, layer by layer, word by word. I don't know what this is, she said finally, but it doesn't feel small. It's not, he agreed. Outside, thunder rolled. Inside, hearts leaned closer. The storm eased up for the first time in over an hour. Raindrops softened, the wind calmed, the building creaked less, but Mariam and Dante didn't notice. They were still there, close, knees brushing, candles still flickering between them. The flame had dipped once, teasing its end, but it held on. You ever wonder why moments like this feel so sacred? Dante asked quietly. Because they're rare, Mariam replied, and real. He reached for her hand, slowly, carefully, like asking permission without words. She let him. Their fingers interlocked. You're not just some girl I met at a lecture, he said. You're the first person in a long time who made me feel known. Same, she said, barely above a whisper. There was a stillness, a pause in the universe. Then, slowly, deliberately, he leaned in. She met him halfway. Their lips touched, soft at first, cautious, like a question asked and answered in a single breath. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't performative. It was two people, soaked, tired, raw, finding something gentle in a world that hadn't been. When they pulled apart, she didn't speak. Neither did he. They didn't need to. The storm may have brought them here, but something else had happened. Not fate, not chance. Just two people. In a shelter, in candlelight, and for the first time in a long time, they both felt safe. The wind outside had settled into a rhythmic hush against the windows, like the city was finally exhaling. Inside Dante's off-campus apartment, the soft glow of the standing lamp cast a warm golden wash over the room. Shadows no longer held tension, only stillness. The kind that comes after something unspoken has shifted. Mariam sat curled on the edge of the couch, her knees drawn up beneath her, a pillow hugged loosely against her stomach. She watched Dante move through the kitchen with a calm she hadn't expected. He was barefoot, sleeves rolled to his forearms, pouring a cup of chamomile like this was any ordinary night. It wasn't. She knew that. He knew it too. No honey, he said, returning with the mug. But it's warm. Warm works, she said quietly, accepting it. Their fingers brushed for a second, a soft slide, a silent spark. She took a sip, then set it down carefully. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, Dante. He turned to face her, attentive. Yeah? Her voice dropped. There's something I should tell you. She hadn't planned to say it. Maybe she'd hoped he'd just know without her having to voice it. But that wasn't fair. Not to him, and not to herself. He waited. Not pressing, just present. I've never... She paused, then started again, eyes fixed on the fabric of her jeans. I've never done this before. The room stilled. Even the radiator seemed to stop humming for a beat. You mean... She nodded, not looking up. Yeah, I've never been with anyone. At all. It hung there, vulnerable, raw. She felt her face burn. The confession wasn't about shame. It was about fear. Not of the act itself, but of what it meant to give someone that part of her. Her first time wasn't something she'd saved because of fear or religion or what people might think. She'd saved it because she'd never found someone who made her feel safe enough to let go. Until now. Dante sat down slowly across from her. His face didn't change. No mockery, no surprise, just softness. "Thank you for telling me," he said. She finally met his gaze. "I didn't want you to think I was playing games or expecting anything. I don't think that, not for a second." She exhaled. "It's not that I'm scared, exactly. He waited. "I don't want this to be something I regret." "Neither do I," he said gently. He reached across the couch, his fingers brushing her knuckles. The contact was light, asking permission, not assuming it. "Miriam, I don't want you to do anything you're not completely sure about. I don't need a performance. I just want you to feel safe. With me. Always." She nodded, the tightness in her chest loosening just a little. "I trust you," she said quietly. "That means everything to me." There was no pressure, no rush, just two hearts choosing stillness over spectacle. And in that stillness, something sacred settled between them. Dante didn't move fast. He didn't lean in suddenly or crowd her space. He sat still, letting her lead. "I don't know the rules," Miriam said softly. "What to do, or what comes first." "There are no rules," he said. "Just your pace, your voice." She smiled, almost shyly. "You always know the right thing to say." "No," he replied. "I just mean every word I say to you." He lifted her hand gently, threading his fingers through hers. "Do you want me to hold you?" He asked. Yes. So he did. They shifted on the couch, her head resting lightly on his chest, his arm wrapping around her shoulders with ease. It was the simplest thing, and yet it held so much weight. The heat of his skin through his shirt, the rise and fall of his breath, the scent of sandalwood and clove clinging faintly to his collar. She'd never felt this seen, not in a way that made her feel exposed, but in a way that made her feel understood. "Your heart's racing," he murmured. "So is yours," she whispered back. That made him laugh under his breath. "I guess that's what happens when something matters." They stayed like that for a while. No rush, no pressure, just breathing, existing. Eventually, Dante stood, extending a hand. "Come with me." She followed him into the bedroom. Small but tidy. The bed was made, the lighting low, the air carrying the faintest hum of jazz from a speaker in the corner. He moved slowly, deliberately. He made space for her to sit first, to look around, to breathe. "If at any point you want to stop," he said, "say it. I won't ask why. I won't try to change your mind." "Okay," she said. "And if all you want is for me to hold you tonight, that's enough for me." She smiled, touched by the sincerity in his eyes. "You're really not like I expected." "Most people aren't," he said. "But we live like they are." She stepped closer, placing a hand over his heart. "Dante? Yeah? I want this. Then I'm honored." He wasn't joking. His voice held reverence. Every time he touched her, her shoulder, her jawline, her wrist, it was with intention. Not as a man trying to take, but as someone grateful to be trusted. There was no fumbling, no awkward rush, just rhythm, respect, warmth. He moved like someone raised to believe women were sacred. And in that moment, Miriam felt exactly that. The sheets were cool beneath her skin, but his warmth made up for it. Dante's kisses weren't demanding, they were explorations, careful, intentional. His hands didn't wander aimlessly. They sought permission with every move. When he slid her jacket off, he paused to meet her eyes. "Okay?" he asked. She nodded. He leaned down, brushing a kiss along her shoulder. Miriam had never felt beautiful in this way before. Not just admired, but revered. There were no grand gestures, no fireworks. But the way he ran his fingers down her spine made her back arch. The way he whispered her name made her thighs tremble. She was still, not frozen in fear, but still in awe of how something could be so gentle, so powerful. Her shirt joined the rest of their clothes in a slow trail toward the floor. Each piece removed with a pause, a breath, a silent check in. By the time he lay beside her, bare and waiting, she didn't feel shy anymore. She felt seen. "Are you sure?" he asked one final time. "Yes," she breathed. He kissed her again, longer this time, deeper, and she let herself fall into the rhythm of him. The way his hands explored her waist, the soft pressure of his lips along her neck, the slow movement that followed. It wasn't like the stories whispered in locker rooms or seen in movies. There was no sudden gasp, no dramatic music, just heat, friction, connection. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, not from pain, but from release. Of years of walls, of doubt, of waiting. He held her through all of it, never rushing, never demanding more than she gave. Their bodies moved like a quiet tide, rising and falling together. When it was over, they didn't speak right away. They just lay there, her head against his shoulder, his fingers tracing shapes against her arm. The silence was full, not empty. Mariam had always wondered what it would feel like. Now she knew. The lamp by the bed still glowed, casting a soft warmth across the sheets. Mariam lay on her side, facing Dante. His fingers were interlaced with hers, their legs tangled beneath the blanket. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. "More than okay." She smiled, not wide or exaggerated, just soft, content. "I was scared," she admitted. "Not of you, of what it would change." "And did it?" "Yes, but not the way I feared." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "I don't take this lightly, Mariam. What you gave me tonight, I'll carry it with respect." She nodded. "You were patient, kind. I needed that more than I realized." There was a calm between them now. Not silence, but peace. "You're not just someone I slept with," she said. "You're someone who made me feel like I mattered." "You do." She looked at the ceiling, thoughts swirling. The world outside would return soon. School, bills, life. But right now, she let herself live in this moment. For the first time in her life, she hadn't been guarded. She hadn't been afraid of being too much or not enough. She'd simply been herself, and she had been embraced. "I gave you everything tonight," she said softly. "My trust, my heart, my body, and I'll never take that for granted," Dante replied. They lay there, skin to skin, heart to heart. Outside the city buzzed, but inside, something quiet, powerful, and lasting had taken root. The soft chirping of birds outside the window was the first sound Mariam heard. The storm had moved on. Sunlight filtered in through the thin curtains, casting streaks of golden warmth across the floor. The scent of melted candle wax still lingered in the air, mixed with the faint trace of Dante's cologne, clean, crisp, and unfamiliar in her space. Her eyes fluttered open. The first thing she saw was his arm, long, pale, resting across her waist. Steady breath tickled the back of her neck. He was still asleep, and for a moment, it felt like time had paused. No worries, no secrets, just comfort. But reality didn't wait long. She slowly shifted out from under his arm, careful not to wake him. Her body ached, not in pain, but in the afterglow of something both physical and deeply emotional. She stood in silence, pulling her oversized t-shirt back over her head, running her hands down her sides. It had happened. It really happened. For the first time in her life, she'd let someone all the way in, body, heart, and soul. And not just anyone. Dante Whitman. He stirred behind her, voice gravelly from sleep. "Hey, where you going?" "Just needed a minute," she said, without turning around. "It's morning." "So it is." His voice was gentle. "You okay?" She nodded, but didn't speak. He sat up, rubbing his eyes. "You regret it?" She hesitated, not because she didn't know, but because the word regret was too big and too heavy for a moment that had meant something. "No," she said softly. "I don't regret it." "Me neither." There was silence again, but this time it wasn't awkward. It was cautious, reverent, even. They both knew that the night they shared was beautiful. But daylight brought questions. What were they now? What happened next? Could two people from such different lives even try to build something real? Dante stood, bare-chested, his jeans still rumpled from the night before. He moved to the small kitchenette and poured 2 glasses of water from the filter pitcher in the fridge. "You hungry?" he asked. "For sleep," she replied. sitting back on the couch and pulling the blanket across her lap. He handed her the glass. "You sure you're okay?" "I'm not broken," she said quickly, then softened her tone. "I'm just thinking about life, choices, consequences." Dante crouched in front of her, resting his arms on his knees. "Look, I know last night was unexpected, but it wasn't a mistake. At least, not for me." Mariam looked at him, searching his face for doubt, but his eyes were steady. "So what now?" she asked. He didn't answer right away, because he didn't know. The drive was quiet at first. Mariam sat with her hands folded in her lap, glancing out the window as they pulled away from the quiet campus. Her thoughts were tangled, a knot of emotions that wouldn't loosen. She wasn't ashamed of the night, but she also wasn't naive about the world outside. Dante tapped the steering wheel lightly. "You sure you don't want breakfast?" "No time. My mom's probably wondering where I am." "Think she'll be mad?" "She'll be suspicious," Mariam replied with a small smirk. "And dramatic. Very dramatic." Dante smiled. "Should I park around the corner?" "No. Bring your rich boy car to the front of the hood. Let him stare." He laughed, but it was laced with nerves. As they turned into her neighborhood, the difference in scenery was stark. Gone were the glass towers and boutique cafes. Here, the roads were rougher, mailboxes tilted. Kids ran barefoot on sidewalks. A pair of teens leaned against a car, bumping Southern rap through broken speakers. An older woman swept her porch, giving their car a long look. Dante adjusted his grip on the steering wheel. "This where you grew up?" "Born and raised. That's Miss Claudine. She'll be on the phone before I reach the door. She looked like she wanted to throw a shoe at me." "That's her being polite." They reached her duplex. Faded blue siding, rusty gate. The porch light still flickered from last night's storm. Mariam exhaled and opened the door. "Wait here." "You sure?" "Let me soften the ground first. My mom doesn't do surprises before noon." She walked up to the porch, knocked twice in a rhythm only family would recognize. The door swung open fast. "Girl, where the—" Naomi stopped mid-sentence when she saw her daughter's face. Her eyes scanned her quickly, then narrowed. "You slept out." "I was safe." "With who?" "Someone important." "Important like your textbooks? Or important like that boy with the dimples who broke your heart in 10th grade? Mariam sighed. "Neither." "Can I come in?" Naomi stepped aside but didn't move far. Her arms were crossed tight. Mariam walked in, dropped her bag by the door, then turned back. "I need to introduce someone." "Lord, be nice." Naomi squinted toward the car outside. "That a Rolls Royce?" "Mercedes. Same tax bracket." Dante stepped out cautiously, locking the car and adjusting his shirt collar. He walked toward the porch with measured steps, like a man walking into court. "Ma'am," he said, offering a respectful nod. Naomi crossed her arms again. "So this is your important?" "Yes, ma'am," Dante said. "You got a resume? Bank statements? Blood test?" "No, ma'am, just intentions and respect." She stared him down for several seconds before nodding once. "You can come in, but take your shoes off. This ain't no hotel." "Understood." As he followed Mariam inside, Dante felt more nervous than he had in any boardroom, but for the first time, he also felt grounded. The following weeks were nothing like either of them expected. They met up often, sometimes at quiet cafes downtown, other times at bookstores or food truck festivals. Mariam introduced him to the smell of hot lemon pepper wings and peach fago. Dante showed her an open-air jazz spot that served gumbo that actually held up to her standards. It wasn't fancy. It was familiar. One evening, they danced barefoot in her living room, while her little cousin filmed it on her phone and said, "I like him. He ain't stiff." Another time, Mariam joined Dante at an event hosted by his foundation. She wore a thrifted dress and vintage earrings. She walked in beside him like she belonged, and she did. They talked for hours about gentrification, access to education, and their dreams. He wanted to change the system from the inside. She wanted to rebuild it from the outside. Their chemistry wasn't flashy, it was deep. On a Friday night, Dante surprised her with a trip to a food co-op opening in a struggling neighborhood. "You remembered," she said. "I listen." Later that night, Under the stars on the hood of his car, she whispered, "Why does this feel so easy?" "Because we're not pretending." Miriam rested her head on his shoulder. Neither of them said love out loud, but it hung in the air, waiting to be named. But every fairy tale has a shadow, and Dante's wore Louboutin heels. Penelope. She still called, still texted, still invited him to fundraisers and art shows. To the public, they were still engaged. Dante hadn't told her about Miriam. He hadn't told his parents either. Every time he tried, his mouth dried up. Because to them, Miriam wouldn't be a woman. She'd be a scandal. One evening, Miriam noticed the way he tensed when his phone rang. "You okay?" "Yeah, just a call I don't want to answer." "Is it her?" He looked at her. Honest, tired. "Yes." "You still haven't told her?" "I will. I'm just trying to figure out how." "You're either with me or with her, Dante." "I'm with you." "Then prove it." That night, he stared at his phone long after she fell asleep beside him. And for the first time, he blocked Penelope's number, but he still hadn't told his family. And he knew, when he did, all hell would break loose. It started small. Miriam felt a little more tired than usual. Food that usually made her mouth water suddenly turned her stomach. Her sense of smell was sharper. Her period was late. She didn't panic. Not at first, but when she found herself crying over a cereal commercial, she knew something wasn't right. She stopped by the pharmacy after class and grabbed a test, stuffing it deep into her purse like a secret weapon. Back home, with shaking hands, she locked the bathroom door. She waited. She prayed. The result was clear, positive. Her breath caught. Her knees weakened. She sat on the edge of the tub, eyes burning. God, I wasn't ready. Her phone buzzed. A text from Dante. "Can I see you tonight?" She didn't respond. She stared at the test again, heart pounding. Her life had changed, and she didn't know what came next, but it was already growing inside her. The bathroom light flickered overhead as Miriam sat on the closed toilet seat, her knee bouncing uncontrollably. The cheap plastic stick lay on the edge of the sink, face down. She couldn't bring herself to look at it yet. Outside the door, the apartment was quiet. Naomi had left early for work. Miriam was alone, for now. Her heart pounded. This wasn't a stomach bug. It wasn't stress. It wasn't late-night cravings or too much juice before bed. She had known for days. Her body was shifting in ways she couldn't ignore. The nausea in the morning, the exhaustion by noon, the strange pull in her chest when she passed a baby stroller outside Walmart. Still, part of her hoped it was something else, anything else. But now, the test was done. All she had to do was look. "God," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do. But I need you right now. Please, please be here." She took one slow breath and reached for it. Turned it over. 2 lines. Positive. Her breath caught in her throat. She didn't scream. She didn't cry, not at first. Just sat there, staring, letting the weight of the news crawl over her skin like wet wool. She pressed a hand to her lower belly. "There's a life in me," she whispered. That's when the tears came. Fast, silent, full. She curled forward, hands over her face, rocking slightly. Not because she was ashamed, not because she regretted anything, but because this moment felt impossibly big. A heartbeat inside her. Hers and Dante's. Her mind raced. What now? School wasn't finished. Money was tight. Naomi would flip. The world would judge. But deeper still was a flicker of something else, a spark, a pulse of joy, quiet and defiant. She was going to be a mother. Miriam wrapped the test in tissue and tucked it deep in the trash under a pile of egg cartons and used paper towels. She washed her face twice before stepping out of the bathroom. The apartment smelled like lemon disinfectant and leftover curry. She sat on the couch, wrapped in her oversized hoodie, her mind spinning. What will Dante say? He hadn't called that morning, not yet, but that wasn't unusual. They had grown closer over the past 2 weeks, since the night they spent together. There were walks, late-night texts, lunch dates tucked in between her work shifts and his meetings. But the future, that had always been a murky subject. He was still engaged, technically, Still caught in that world. Still the son of David and Marianne Whitman. Still standing on a life platform she didn't belong to. Am I enough for him to let go of all that? Will he see this baby as a gift? Or a complication? Her stomach turned again. She closed her eyes and prayed. Lord, if he walks away, help me walk with you. But if this child is part of something good, give me the strength to fight for it. Her phone buzzed. It was him, Dante, still thinking about last night. You free this evening? Her hand shook as she typed back, Mariam. Yeah. Can we talk? I need to see you. He responded instantly. Dante, name the place. They met at the Botanical Garden near Piedmont Park. Her choice. It was quiet, shaded, full of blooming things. It had always made her feel calmer, like life was still happening. Even when hers felt paused, Dante stood under the trellis, his back to her, scrolling through his phone. He looked casual, black Henley, jeans, clean sneakers, but the air shifted the moment he saw her. Hey, he said, smile softening. You okay? She nodded, then shook her head. Not really. His smile faded. He stepped closer, careful. Did something happen? She took a breath. I need you to listen and not interrupt, okay? Okay. A few weeks ago, something happened between us. I didn't plan it. I wasn't trying to trap anyone. I wasn't even sure what I felt, but I know what I feel now. His brows drew together. You're scaring me. She reached into her bag and pulled out the test, double wrapped in a clean paper towel, and handed it to him. He stared at it for a moment, before unwrapping. 2 lines. He blinked, looked up at her, looked back down. This is real? She nodded, eyes glistening. I took 2 more to be sure. He exhaled, hand going through his hair, walked a few steps away, came back. You're pregnant. Yes. With my baby. Yes. He looked at her then, really looked, and saw everything. Her fear, her bravery, her faith that he wouldn't run. You thought I'd leave, he said quietly. I didn't know, Mariam. He closed the space between them in 2 steps, cupped her face. You're carrying my child. There's nothing in this world that means more than that. Even your engagement? He nodded. Especially that. She blinked. You're serious. I've been serious since the moment I met you. She let out a sound, part sob, part laugh, and fell into his arms. I was so scared, she admitted. You don't have to be anymore. But your parents, your world, let them talk. Let them scream. I know what I want now. And what is that? You. And our baby. They sat on a garden bench, surrounded by flowers. The city buzzed in the distance, but their world had narrowed to this one spot. Dante held her hand the entire time. I'm going to talk to Penelope, he said. Tonight, she'll hate you. She already doesn't love me. That's harsh. It's real, Mariam exhaled. What about your family? They'll be furious. So. I've spent most of my life trying to meet their expectations, but the only time I've ever felt peace, real peace, is when I'm with you. This won't be easy. I don't want easy. I want honest. I want us. He dropped to one knee, not to propose, but to level his eyes with hers. Mariam, I can't promise that the road ahead will be smooth, but I promise I won't leave. Not now. Not ever. She covered her mouth with her free hand, tears spilling. We're gonna figure this out, he said. Together. She pulled him into an embrace so tight, it felt like a vow. Not a fantasy, not a rescue, but a beginning. Dante stood in front of the towering glass doors of the Whitman estate, his hands clenched at his sides. The air smelled of jasmine and freshly cut grass, but it did nothing to ease the storm brewing in his chest. He hadn't been home in weeks. His father's assistant had arranged this meeting, not out of warmth, but necessity. Your father demands an update, she'd said in that clipped tone that made him feel 12 again. Inside, the familiar coldness of the marble foyer greeted him. House staff nodded silently as they passed. His mother, Marianne, emerged first, every hair pinned perfectly, her pearls resting just right above her collarbone. Dante, she said, pecking his cheek with the enthusiasm of a handshake. You look rugged. Hi, Mom. he replied dryly. Is Dad in the study? Naturally. And Penelope is already here. We assumed you'd want privacy for this meeting. His stomach tightened. He followed her through the corridor, past oil portraits and chandeliers, until they entered the formal dining room. David Whitman sat at the head of the table, posture stiff, eyes scanning a manila folder. Penelope sat to his left, poised in a cream blazer, legs crossed, looking every bit the senator's daughter she was born to be. Son, David said, not looking up. Father, let's get to it. Dante nodded and pulled out the chair across from them. His heart beat hard but steady. I'm here because I owe all of you honesty. I've made some decisions that don't align with the life you've planned for me. His mother raised an eyebrow. Penelope straightened her back. His father said nothing. I've been seeing someone, Dante continued. Her name is Mariam. She's smart, grounded, kind, and we're expecting a child. A pause so thick, it could have shattered glass. Excuse me? Marianne said, her hand frozen mid-reach for her wine glass. She's due in a few months. And I've decided to be with her. David's nostrils flared. Penelope said nothing, not even a gasp, not a raised voice, just silence. So you've thrown away 10 years of planning, his father finally said. For a girl from, where, exactly? Atlanta Metro. She's a student. Working class. So this is rebellion? No. This is real. Penelope spoke at last. You could have told me. I didn't know how to, Dante admitted. You deserve better than being lied to. She gave a soft, almost imperceptible nod. And your legacy? What happens to the company name when the press finds out? Dante stood. I'm not ashamed. And I'm not hiding. You'll regret this, David said, standing to match him. That girl? That life? It's not built to last. Neither is this house, Dante replied. Not if it costs me my soul. He turned, leaving the room in stunned silence. Dante didn't make it 5 steps past the front door before his father called after him. If you walk out now, don't expect to come back. He stopped, hand resting on the polished brass handle. His mother stood nearby, face frozen in practiced disappointment. Penelope hadn't moved from her chair. You taught me to chase power, Dante said without turning, but I'd rather chase peace. You're throwing everything away, David barked. For a scandal. Dante turned to face him, calm but firm. It's not a scandal. It's my child, and the woman I love. There will be consequences. I'm ready. His father's face darkened. You're officially removed from the succession line. Your company accounts will be locked by morning. And don't think the board will back you when they hear this. Let them hear it, Dante said. I've lived in a mansion full of ghosts. I'd rather sleep on a mattress with meaning. His mother interjected. Don't do this, Dante. Think about what you're losing. He looked her in the eye. I am. And none of it matters if I lose myself. He opened the door and walked out into the night air. Cool, biting, free. That same night, he received the official termination email, executive privileges revoked, access disabled, and a formal press release drafted announcing his indefinite leave. His name was scrubbed from the Whitman Group website by morning. No calls from friends, no messages from colleagues. He was no longer heir to an empire, just a man who chose love. The elevator dinged at the top floor of the Whitman Tower, 72 stories above the Atlanta skyline. Dante stepped into his penthouse one last time. It looked the same, minimalist, cold, spotless. The walls were adorned with abstract art he never chose. The wine rack held bottles he didn't drink. The air always smelled like lavender oil and leather. He wandered through the rooms, the one with the piano he never played, the study no one read in, the glass dining table no family ever gathered around. He packed slowly, a duffel bag with 2 button-downs, some jeans, a leather journal, and 1 framed photo. The only real thing in the whole place, a snapshot of him and Mariam walking on campus, laughing, caught off guard. He stood at the massive window one last time, gazing out at the world he'd been raised to control. Goodbye, he whispered. By the afternoon, his keys were dropped at the front desk. Security gave him a long look, but said nothing. He took the elevator down and never looked back. No car service, no driver. He caught a bus. For the first time in over a decade, no tinted glass, no silence, just the hum of the city, alive, imperfect, real. That night, he slept in a motel near Midtown, the mattress firm and unfamiliar. But he slept. Deeply. For the first time in years, it was perfect. Dante moved in with only a borrowed mattress, a box of books, and a second-hand coffee table. The walls were bare. The fridge was half empty. But the space felt his. The next day, he applied for work. Not as a CEO, not as a name on a board, but as a man with a degree and a willingness to work. He got a job at a nonprofit startup, doing logistics and operations for community housing. The pay? A quarter of what he used to make. The fulfillment? Immeasurable. He took public transit, cooked his own meals, grocery shopped with a calculator. He learned how to fix his own pipes, fold sheets without maids, and brew coffee without a smart machine. He wasn't slumming. He was living. One night, as he walked home in the rain with a broken umbrella and soaked shoes, he smiled to himself. Dante walked in with a bag of groceries and a tired grin. The cashier gave me a free plantain. Said I looked like I needed potassium. She's right, Miriam said. You're still too pale. He leaned down and kissed her cheek. You're glowing. I'm sweating, she corrected. Still counts. They sat on the couch later, cheap but comfy, eating together while the TV played a rerun of an old family sitcom. There were no crystal glasses, no catered meals, just love. Real, honest, day-to-day love. They read devotionals together in the morning. They prayed before doctor's appointments. They built furniture from scratch, laughed over cracked eggs, argued about laundry, and held each other during late-night scares about the future. It wasn't easy, but it was theirs. One night, as they lay in bed, Miriam's head resting on his shoulder, she whispered, You gave up everything. No, he replied. I finally gained something worth holding, even if your old world never accepts us. I didn't come from love, Miriam. I found it here. They fell asleep in each other's arms, not just dreaming, but living the dream they'd once been told was impossible. Miriam rubbed cocoa butter into her belly in slow circles, standing in front of the mirror. The baby kicked softly, a rhythm she had grown to love. The evening sun filtered through the blinds, casting warm lines on the faded carpet of their apartment. The phone buzzed on the counter. Unknown number. She hesitated, then picked up. Hello? There was a pause, and then the voice came. Crisp, elegant, unmistakably smug. Miriam, I wasn't sure this was still your number. I hoped it would be. Miriam's stomach turned. She didn't need an introduction. She knew the voice, from gala interviews, from magazine clips, and once, from a confrontation that haunted her. Penelope, what do you want? To do what no one else seems willing to do. Tell you the truth. Miriam stayed silent, jaw tight. Dante and I had lunch last week, Penelope continued. Private suite. Just us. No press. No one watching. Miriam closed her eyes. The baby moved again. Sharper this time. He looked exhausted, Penelope said softly. He told me everything. That he misses the structure, the stability. That this experiment with you was just that, a phase. Miriam gripped the edge of the sink. You're lying. You know I'm not. He's coming back. Not just to me, to who he's always been. You and I both know he was never meant for this. He left your world for me, Miriam snapped. Did he? Penelope asked calmly. Or did he just need a break? Click. Miriam ended the call and dropped the phone onto the counter like it burned. She stood frozen for a long moment. The room began to spin, her reflection blurred. She didn't cry, not yet. Miriam sat on the floor of their bedroom, back against the wall, knees pulled up, her hoodie zipped to the chin. The house was quiet, too quiet. Outside, the sounds of kids playing echoed faintly from the parking lot. The scent of sautéed onions from the apartment next door drifted under their doorframe. But inside her chest, everything felt hollow. He wouldn't, she whispered. But would he? She remembered the look on Dante's face during their last conversation, the way he'd kissed her forehead before work, the care he took, placing a throw pillow behind her back each night. But now, doubt had crept in like a shadow. What if Penelope was telling the truth? He had once been part of that world. Polished, strategic, groomed for wealth and politics. Maybe the reality of cheap rent and stretch marks was too much. Maybe he missed the feeling of not worrying about bills. Maybe she'd been a charity case, a romantic rebellion that had run its course. Her phone buzzed again. A text from Dante. Running late. Boss needed help with inventory. Picking up dinner after. Love you. Mariam stared at the screen. Love you. Those words should have brought peace, but now they scratched at her soul. Because what if he said the same thing to Penelope? Over lunch, she tucked the phone away and reached for her Bible on the nightstand. She flipped it open, hoping something would leap out, but all she saw was the blur of tears rising too fast to stop. She set the book down and whispered, God, I need to know the truth. I need to know if I'm enough. Dante returned home just past 8 p.m. His shirt sleeves were rolled, and his forehead glistened from sweat. He carried a takeout bag in one hand and a small bouquet of corner store flowers in the other. The moment he opened the door, he felt it. The stillness. Mariam? She sat on the couch, hands folded in her lap, face unreadable. Hey, he said gently, setting the bags down. What's going on? Penelope called me. Dante's face shifted. First confusion, then realization, then something close to fury. What did she say? She said you two had lunch, that you told her you were coming back. That's not true. So you didn't meet her? Dante hesitated. I did. Once. Last week. At the board's request. They wanted me to consider coming back. Penelope happened to be there. So you were with her. Not like that. Mariam stood now. Why didn't you tell me? Because I knew how it would sound. But nothing happened. I didn't even stay for dessert. She said you miss that life. I miss convenience. Sure. I don't miss pretending. Why not tell me? Because I was afraid of this exact moment. You doubting everything we've built. The baby kicked again. Mariam put a hand on her belly. Dante stepped forward. I love you. Not just in moments. In choices. In everyday decisions. He pulled something from his jacket pocket. A crumpled napkin, with Penelope's number scratched out in ink and a note, closed door. Wrong life. No going back. I left this on the table when I walked out, he said. Ask the waiter. Mariam stared at the napkin, then at him. You really walked away? I already did. For you, for us. The silence between them cracked, and Mariam, finally, let herself believe again. They sat on the floor, food untouched, knees touching. The tension that once sat like a wall between them had melted into something else. Raw honesty. Mariam leaned her head on his shoulder. I wanted to believe you, she said quietly, but her words, they cut deep. She's good at that. She was raised to weaponize poise. I've spent my life questioning whether I'm enough. Today, it almost broke me. Dante took her hand. You've always been more than enough. But you don't need me to tell you that. You already are. Without the mansion, without the baby, you're whole. She closed her eyes. I need to learn to trust you completely. Then let me earn it daily. And I need to trust myself too. I'll help you. They leaned into each other. No background music, no spotlight. Just two people choosing each other again. That night, they prayed together. They held each other through the weight of what had almost been lost. And when Mariam drifted to sleep on his chest, her fears stilled. Dante made a silent vow. This love wouldn't just survive. It would thrive. The next morning was quiet. Dante stood in the kitchen, flipping pancakes that looked more like abstract art than breakfast. Mariam laughed from the couch. You need to stop watching cooking tutorials, she teased. You need to stop insulting my masterpieces. Stick to real estate and love declarations. Actually. He wiped his hands and walked over, knelt, right there, beside the coffee table with chipped paint and a half-open jar of peanut butter. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. Mariam's breath caught. This isn't about show, Dante said. It's not about a stage or perfect lighting. It's about us. This life. This apartment, this future. He opened the box. Inside was a simple, stunning ring. Marry me, Mariam. Not because we're having a baby, not because it's expected, but because you're the person I want to walk beside every single day. Tears filled her eyes. She didn't need time. She didn't need to weigh options. She already knew. Yes, she whispered. Louder, he grinned. Yes! They laughed. He slipped the ring on her finger, and the baby kicked like it knew something beautiful just happened. They held each other tight, hearts beating in sync. This wasn't the end of a story. It was the beginning of forever. The sun hadn't fully risen when Mariam stepped outside to take the trash out. Her sandals scraped the concrete, the plastic bag swinging slightly in her hand. She was dressed in one of Dante's old shirts, her baby bump stretching the fabric. Her hair was tied in a messy scarf, and the Atlanta morning air clung to her skin like mist. Mrs. Loretta, the neighbor across the street, was already watering her garden, her eyes tracking Mariam like a hawk. Morning, Mariam offered softly. Was all she got in return. It started that way. Cold glances, whispered greetings, side eyes from the women who used to call her church sweetheart. The rumors had spread faster than wildfire. That Whitman boy left her, thought she was climbing high. Now look at her. Always knew something wasn't right. At the market, the cashier who once gave her coupons didn't smile anymore. The same aunties who had once asked her to tutor their kids now whispered into their phones when she passed. Even at church, a place she'd always found peace, Sister Geraldine's prayer request had felt like a dagger. Let us pray for young women who forget their worth and lie with men not meant for them. She hadn't named names. She didn't need to. Even Mariam's old classmates looked at her with something between pity and pride. Like her fall from grace made their struggles more justified. I heard she thought he was going to marry her. One girl laughed near the student center. Girl, his mama probably laughed her out the room. Mariam kept her head down. But the truth was, it hurt. Not because they were wrong, but because they had no idea what she and Dante had shared, or what they'd given up. Back at the house, Naomi was waiting in the kitchen, stirring a pot of grits while humming an old gospel tune. You all right? She asked without turning. Yeah, Mariam replied, setting the milk back in the fridge. Just needed some air. Naomi turned then, wiping her hands on her apron. Her expression was steady. Not cold, not warm, just steady. I know it's hard, she said gently. But the world don't stop because folks talk. Mariam nodded, lips pressed together. But sometimes, Naomi continued, the talk has truth in it. That made Mariam flinch. You don't think I know what I'm doing? Naomi sat at the table, motioning for Mariam to join her. Baby, I think you're smart. Smarter than me when I was your age. But smart don't mean invincible. Mariam looked away. You gave your heart to someone who wasn't raised for this life. That boy didn't grow up dodging eviction notices. He grew up sipping tea in penthouses. He left all that, Mariam said, more to herself than her mother. He chose me. Did he? Naomi raised an eyebrow. Or did he walk away, 'cause he ain't had a plan? Mariam's throat tightened. You see a love story. I see a storm coming. And I'm not trying to bury my grandchild in heartbreak before they even take their first breath. Silence filled the room. Finally, Naomi reached across the table, her hand covering Mariam's. I want to believe in him, baby, but I need you to be ready in case he don't come through. Mariam nodded once, tears pressing at the corners of her eyes. I am, but deep down, she wasn't sure. That night, Mariam stood alone in the tiny backyard. The stars were out, clear and sharp, like God had pinned each one just for her. Crickets chirped somewhere in the grass. The neighbor's dog barked once and fell quiet. She wrapped her arms around herself, the baby kicking softly beneath her hand. We're okay, she whispered. We're gonna be okay. But the moment the words left her lips, they cracked. Her breath hitched. Tears slipped down her cheeks. She sank onto the back step and let the sobs come. Deep, heaving, soul-crushing sobs. Not just from heartbreak, but from exhaustion. From fear. From shame. From carrying more than her body should at once. She had given everything. Her trust, her dreams, her body, her heart. She had fought to believe that love could conquer class, that faith could override failure, And now she was mocked, shamed, and isolated. Her friends barely called. Her reputation ruined in hushed conversations and pointed stares. Even Naomi's support came with caution tape. She missed the girl she was before the lecture, before the night with Dante, before the pregnancy test turned pink. God, she cried, rocking gently. I don't know if I made the right choice. No answer came. Just wind, and more silence. The next morning came with gray skies. Miriam didn't get out of bed until almost noon. She ignored the messages from her class group chat and turned her phone to silent. She stared at the ceiling, hand resting on her belly, the baby shifting gently beneath her ribs. She needed peace. She needed strength. She needed something to remind her that all this wasn't for nothing. That's when her phone buzzed. She hesitated, then reached for it. Dante, hey, I know it's been rough, but I need you to trust me. I've got a surprise. Don't ask questions. Just be home at 6. Miriam stared at the screen, her heart hammering. A surprise? He hadn't texted much in the past week, working double shifts, trying to stack money for the baby, she assumed. She sat up slowly. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She typed, "Okay," then erased it. She typed again, "I trust you," then sent it, and for the first time in days, she felt the tiniest flicker of light. Not relief, not joy, just hope. The kind that makes your chest rise differently. The kind that says, maybe, just maybe. Redemption is on its way. The sun had just begun to set, casting warm orange light through the apartment blinds. Miriam had just finished folding baby onesies, a gift from one of the neighbors who had finally come around. She rubbed her belly, humming softly as her feet rested on a pillow. Dante stood in the kitchen, pretending to check something on the stove. "You hungry?" he asked, a little too casually. "Always," she smiled. "Why?" "Because dinner's ready. But there's something else I need to do first." He wiped his hands, took a deep breath, and walked toward her. She looked up as he knelt in front of her, not with the ease of habit, but with the nervousness of someone who'd waited a long time to get it right. "Mariam Joy Okafor," he began, voice low, "before I met you, I knew wealth, but I didn't know value. I had comfort, but no peace. I walked in privilege, but I never stood in purpose." She blinked, her eyes already welled with tears. "You changed that," he continued. "You believed in me before I deserved it. You carried this child with strength I couldn't match, and even when I had nothing, you gave me your everything." He pulled a small box from his back pocket. Inside was a simple gold ring, delicate, smooth, elegant. No diamond, no flash, but more meaning than a vault full of gems. "I can't offer you the world I came from, but I can promise you the world we'll build together, with love, with honesty, with faith. Will you marry me, Mariam?" She stared at him, tears falling freely now, heart racing. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Dante. 1,000,000 times yes." He slid the ring on her finger, then kissed her, slow, deep, and trembling with joy. Behind them, the rice overcooked, but neither of them noticed. Later that week, Mariam and Dante stood outside Naomi's modest home. The porch light flickered slightly, and the wooden steps creaked as they climbed. Dante adjusted his jacket. Mariam held his hand tightly. "She's not going to throw a slipper at you," Mariam teased, trying to break the tension. "Not worried about the slipper," Dante smirked. "It's the eyes I fear." She laughed, then knocked. Naomi opened the door, her apron dusted with flour and a wary look in her eyes. "Evening," she said, looking between the two of them. "Hi, Mama," Mariam smiled. "Come in." They sat at the kitchen table. The smell of fresh cornbread filled the room. Naomi poured sweet tea into 3 glasses. Dante cleared his throat. "Ma'am," he began. "Naomi is fine," she interrupted. "Naomi," he corrected. I came today, not just as the man who got your daughter pregnant, but as the man who intends to spend the rest of his life honoring her." Naomi's expression shifted, not soft, not stern, just focused. "I've made mistakes," Dante continued, "but I've never been more sure about anything in my life than this." He pulled Mariam's hand into his own and showed her the ring. Naomi leaned forward, staring. Silence stretched. "So you're serious," she said at last. "Completely," Dante replied. "You ready for the ugly days too? The nights when money's tight, when the baby won't stop crying, when love ain't sweet?" "Yes, ma'am." "Then who am I to stand in the way?" She turned to Miriam. "You sure, baby?" "Yes, mama. I've never been more sure." Naomi exhaled deeply, then smiled, small but sincere. "Well, I suppose we should start planning a wedding." The following Saturday was quiet. Miriam sat with Naomi in the living room, watching an old family movie. Dante had gone to pick up some groceries, leaving the house peaceful and slow. Suddenly, the sound of an engine rolled down the street, smooth, deep, unmistakably expensive. Naomi stood up and peeked through the curtains. "Lord," she muttered, "that's a Rolls Royce." Miriam's stomach dropped. "A what?" Before she could respond, the car pulled up in front of the house. Black, sleek, and shining like it belonged to another world entirely. The back door opened. Out stepped David Whitman, followed by Marianne Whitman. Miriam's mouth fell open. Naomi crossed her arms, skeptical. They approached the porch slowly. David in a tailored navy coat, Marianne in a pressed blouse and flats, her pearls glinting under the sun. Naomi opened the door just before they knocked. "Well, well," she said flatly. "Wasn't expecting royalty." "We're not here with arrogance," David said calmly. "We're here to ask." For a moment, "Does Dante know you're here?" Miriam asked, voice barely steady. "He doesn't," Marianne replied. "This was our decision." Naomi hesitated, then stepped aside. "You have 5 minutes. Make them count." The four of them sat at the kitchen table. The air was tense, heavy, unmoving. David was the first to speak. "I was wrong." 3 words that dropped like stones into water. "When Dante walked away, I thought he was throwing his future away. I didn't realize he was walking toward something more meaningful. We judged you," Marianne said softly. "Not because of who you were, but because of who we thought you weren't. That's our shame, not yours." Miriam looked down. Naomi kept her arms folded, but her expression changed, just slightly. "We know we can't erase the damage," David continued. "But we want to be part of our grandchild's life, and yours. If you'll let us." Miriam's voice shook. "Why now?" "Because silence is a poor substitute for love," Marianne said. "We missed our son. And we realized we'll miss even more if pride keeps us out of this home." Naomi spoke slowly. "A lot of people apologize when it's convenient, but real growth takes roots." David nodded. "Then let us earn it." Silence again. A beat of consideration. Then Miriam stood. "I can't forget what happened overnight, but I believe in healing. If Dante could walk away from gold for truth, maybe we all can." Marianne's eyes brimmed with tears. David nodded, swallowing hard. The door creaked behind them. Dante stood there, grocery bag in hand, frozen. "Mom? Dad? We came to say we're sorry," his mother said, standing. He stepped forward slowly, unsure, then hugged them both. Long, tight, unspoken forgiveness exchanged in embrace. That night, the small house overflowed with something it hadn't held in months. Joy. Naomi cooked extra. David offered to help, clumsily but sincerely. Marianne folded baby clothes. With Miriam, Dante played soft music in the background, sneaking glances at his fiancée every few minutes. Stories were shared. Laughter flowed. Barriers melted. Naomi still had her guard, but even she cracked a joke or two. She even gave David a hard time about his soft hands. "You ever fixed a leaky faucet, Mr. Whitman? Does paying a plumber count?" He grinned. By the end of the night, when the table had been cleared and the baby kicked against Miriam's ribs again, everyone sat in the living room, warm and exhausted. "I never thought I'd see this," Dante said, voice quiet. "Neither did I," Miriam whispered, laying her head on his shoulder. Marianne watched them, her hands resting over her lap. "You two have something rare. Don't let the world ruin it." Naomi gave a nod of agreement, small but honest. As the Rolls Royce pulled away that night, it wasn't a symbol of wealth or pride anymore. It was a reminder that even the coldest roads can lead back home. The decision to get married wasn't made over candlelight or grand gestures. It happened on the couch. "I don't want a perfect wedding," Miriam had said, her hand on her belly. "I want a true one." "Then let's make it true," Dante replied. "Small, honest, ours." From that moment, everything changed, not in chaos, but in purpose. The modest apartment filled with lists, handwritten checkboxes on grocery paper, names scribbled on napkins, timelines pinned to the fridge with cartoon magnets. They didn't have planners. They had people. Naomi offered the old family Bible to use at the altar. Dante's co-worker volunteered his cousin, a gospel singer, for the ceremony. Miriam's church family pitched in with cooking and decorations. Dante sold his watch, one of the few luxury items he hadn't pawned, to rent the chapel and cover the marriage license. They found Miriam's dress at a resale boutique. It needed a bit of stitching and a lot of faith, but it fit her like God had designed it himself. Dante wore a suit borrowed from his nonprofit boss, slightly too short in the sleeves, but ironed with pride. No glam teams, no videographers, just love and help. Naomi and Miriam sewed the table runners by hand. Miriam's best friend, Cassie, took over the task of finding simple white chairs and sourcing bulk flowers. They laughed through mistakes, like the time Dante accidentally ordered pink napkins that said Sweet 16 on them, or when the church rehearsal was delayed because someone's toddler locked the bathroom from the inside. But nothing ruined it, because every step was wrapped in sincerity. Even Penelope, yes, that Penelope, sent a simple handwritten card that read, "Wishing you peace, forgiveness, and joy. We were never meant to be, but I'm glad you found your person. Congratulations." It shocked Miriam. It softened Dante. It was as if the world, slowly and cautiously, was making room for their truth. The chapel was small, tucked between a bakery and a clinic on the west side. It had 12 pews, creaky wooden floors, and a pulpit that had seen better days. But it was sacred. It held the smell of hymnals and old varnish. Sunlight poured through the stained glass, casting soft colors across the room, as Miriam stood in the back, gripping her bouquet of baby's breath and wildflowers. Naomi adjusted her veil. "You look like your grandma," she whispered. She'd be so proud. Miriam blinked back tears. The music began, a single keyboard playing "Great Is Thy Faithfulness." In the front, Dante stood beside the pastor, his eyes never leaving the aisle. He looked nervous, reverent, overwhelmed. Miriam walked slowly. No orchestra, no spotlights, just steps of courage, memory, and forgiveness. When she reached him, he took her hand, calloused from work, steady with promise. "You okay?" she whispered. "I've never been more sure," he replied. The vows weren't flowery. They were real. "I vow to protect this family, not with money, but with heart. I vow to grow with you, not just in love, but in patience and grace." They didn't kiss like a movie. They kissed like people who had fought wars just to stand still in peace. The applause was loud. The tears were honest. Outside, the reception spilled into the street. Folding tables covered with aluminum pans of macaroni, fried chicken, collard greens, and banana pudding. Someone played old-school R&B from a speaker in their trunk. Dante's old nonprofit team showed up with hugs and a bottle of sparkling cider. Miriam's church ladies danced harder than the teens. Naomi even hugged David Whitman, who, after much pressure and private guilt, had flown in quietly the morning of. He didn't make a speech. He just stood back, eyes glistening, and whispered to Naomi, "They made it without us." "They did," she replied, "and maybe that's why it'll last." The labor started 2 weeks early. Miriam woke at 2:17 a.m., breath catching in her throat. At first, she thought it was just the baby shifting, but then the pressure came again. "Dante," she whispered, nudging him. He blinked. I think it's time." He was out of bed in 3 seconds, stumbling over his sweatpants, grabbing the bag they'd packed 3 times already. The ride to the hospital was quiet, not from fear, but focus. They'd practiced breathing, rehearsed what to say, prayed through every scenario. The nurses greeted them kindly. The doctor on call remembered Miriam from her earlier checkups. Time blurred. There were hours of pain, then relief, Then more pain. Naomi arrived halfway through, holding her daughter's hand and wiping sweat from her forehead. Dante didn't leave the room once. Not to eat, not to rest. "You've got this," he whispered again and again. At 9:42 a.m., a cry pierced the hospital room, sharp, clear, full of life. "It's a girl," the nurse said. "They named her Grace, because that's what it took to get here." Miriam held her first, eyes wide with wonder. Her daughter had a tuft of black hair and Dante's nose. Dante held her next, silently. He didn't speak for a long minute, just looked. "You changed everything," he finally said, voice cracking. They stayed that way, skin to skin, breath to breath, Miriam and Dante. And Grace, 3 hearts, stitched together by faith, choice, and the kind of love people write stories about. The Whitmans came to the cookout. Yes, you read that right. It started as a joke, Miriam teasing Dante about inviting his parents to a neighborhood barbecue. But then Penelope sent a text. "We'll come if Naomi makes her famous baked beans." So Naomi made them. The backyard was small but lively. Folding tables stacked with ribs, hot dogs, and cornbread. Kids running with water balloons. Church members bringing extra chairs. Gospel music drifting over laughter. Dante's mother brought potato salad, surprisingly good. David didn't speak much, but he held Grace for a solid hour and smiled more than anyone had seen in years. "She looks like your mother," he said quietly to Dante. "She's got Miriam's eyes," Dante replied. Naomi and Marianne Whitman, 2 women from worlds apart, sat on the porch together, sharing stories over lemonade. "You raised him soft," Naomi said. "And you made him strong," Marianne replied. Cassie snapped photos of everything, Dante grilling, Miriam dancing with Grace in her arms, old friends and new ones mingling without walls between them. Church the next morning was packed. Pastor Jenkins announced the arrival of baby Grace and invited the family to the front. They stood there, 3 generations deep, and were prayed over with open arms and honest blessings. "This union wasn't born from perfection," the pastor said. "It was born from perseverance. And that, my friends, is how legacies are made." After service, Penelope offered to host Christmas dinner. David promised to fund Miriam's next semester. And for once, the love didn't feel forced. It just was. The house was quiet. Grace had finally drifted off after her nightly fuss. A warm bottle, a lullaby sung soft against her cheek, and 2 tired parents taking turns pacing the living room floor until her eyelids surrendered to sleep. Now Miriam and Dante sat curled up on their worn-out couch, the baby monitor glowing faintly on the side table. The TV was off. No music played. The only sound was the gentle hum of the refrigerator and the occasional whoosh of passing cars outside. Miriam's head rested against Dante's chest, his arm draped around her shoulder, fingers tracing slow, absent-minded patterns against her arm. "All's like we blinked and got here," he whispered. Miriam smiled. "Some days felt longer than a year, especially that week we ran out of diapers and got a flat tire in the same day." She laughed quietly. "Don't remind me. They weren't in a penthouse. The apartment was still small. The furniture was mismatched. The paint had chipped in the hallway. But the space carried peace, earned, not gifted." On the wall hung a single framed photo, the 3 of them at Grace's dedication, smiling in front of the church. It wasn't glamorous, but it radiated something stronger than wealth, joy rooted in growth. Dante exhaled, his voice softer now. "I thought I needed more before I could be happy. But this..." He looked around the room. "This is more than enough." Later that night, Miriam reached into the drawer beside the bed and pulled out their Bible. It was the same one Naomi had given them before the wedding. Worn along the spine, pages highlighted and dog-eared from months of late-night readings. She flipped through it, settling on Romans 8:28. "And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are the called, according to his purpose." She read it aloud. Dante, already lying back, opened his eyes and smiled. "That verse got us through the worst days." "It still does," she said. They took turns reading, Proverbs, Psalms, a bit from the Gospels. Their voices wove together like a thread, pulling the loose ends of their day into a tighter knot of peace. When they finished, They clasped hands. Mariam began to pray. Thank you for this home, even when it was uncertain. For this baby, even when we were afraid. For a love that didn't give up. She paused. And thank you for grace, not just our daughter, but the kind you give when we fail. Dante added softly, thank you for second chances. And for showing us that purpose looks nothing like power. Their room wasn't filled with incense or choirs, but the spirit rested in their gratitude. They lay in bed facing each other. You remember the first time you told me you loved me? Dante asked. I remember you stuttering halfway through it, Mariam teased. Hey, it was nerves. I had never said it like that before, not where it mattered. Mariam grinned. It mattered to me. There was a long pause before he spoke again. I used to think love was about the big things, the trips, the rings, the houses. He looked her in the eyes. But real love, it showed up when you prayed for me in silence, when you forgave me when I didn't deserve it, when you stood by me without a single dollar to your name. She blinked slowly. I think the world teaches us to measure worth by the number in our accounts or the brands we wear, she said. But all of that fades. Her hand brushed against his. But faith? Forgiveness? That's what stays. That's what saves. They both nodded. Because they knew now, status fades. But soul stays. There had been a time when Dante had everything, but it wasn't until he lost it, the penthouse, the trust fund, the elite social circles, that he began to live. It took sacrifice to see clearly. Giving up luxury taught him gratitude. Walking away from expectations taught him identity. And stepping into the unknown with Mariam taught him trust, in love, in himself, and in a God he'd only known vaguely through tradition. I wouldn't go back, he said suddenly. Mariam tilted her head. To what? The old life. Not even for a second. Not if it meant losing this. She squeezed his hand. Sacrifice hurts, she said. But it leaves room for real blessings. They thought about all they'd endured. The judgment, the cold nights, the scraping of coins for groceries, the hospital bills, the whispered doubts. And yet, here they were, still together, still choosing, still blessed. The baby monitor lit up briefly, a small coo drifting from the speaker, then silence again. Dante turned off the lamp, casting the room in soft shadows. Mariam shifted closer, her voice low. You know, if someone told me a year ago that I'd be married, have a baby, and be sleeping next to a man who gave up everything for me. She shook her head. I would have laughed. Dante smiled. Yeah? Yeah. I would have said that sounds like a bad soap opera plot. They both chuckled. Then Mariam grew quiet, eyes fixed on the ceiling. But you know what I learned the most? She asked. Tell me. People are quick to judge what they don't understand. They're even quicker to speak on what isn't their business. She rolled onto her side, facing him fully. But God, he's not loud. He doesn't always send burning bushes or booming voices. She paused. Sometimes, when he sends an answer, it doesn't knock. A slow smile spread across her face. It rolls up, in a Rolls Royce. Dante burst out laughing, pressing a pillow over his face to muffle it. Mariam joined in, both of them giggling like teenagers under the covers. You're never gonna let that go, are you? He said, Nope. They lay there, laughter fading into contentment, hearts full. And outside their window, the street was still. But inside that room, peace reigned, not because everything was perfect, but because it was real, like